We are beyond excited to pitch this idea, which proposes to bring together research and entrepreneurship to solve one of the biggest bottlenecks to large-scale reforestation in our state. And that's a supply of climate-adapted tree seedlings needed for adaptation and mitigation in the Northwoods. The Nature Conservancy is a community partner on this proposal because we have a pressing need for climate adapted seedlings as we lean in on tackling climate change. Each year, we plant more than 500,000 trees, but we know this isn't enough. The demand is on the rise for seeds and seedlings to climate-proof millions of acres of Minnesota forests. The current production model just cannot keep up. Our 4 project components will create the enabling conditions that take us from a climate vulnerable forest and economy where we are today to where we need to be, and that's a resilient forest and a thriving economy. To get there, first, we need to step up collection of climate adapted tree seeds. This project provides training on best practices for doing just that. Second, we need a new production model for tree seedlings, and this is going to get us there through the growers network. Third, we need climate-informed seed sourcing guidelines, which are addressed here by generating the scientific evidence needed to update Minnesota policy. And finally, as a bonus, we believe that the localized supply chains created here can stimulate the economy in Northeast Minnesota. So now I'm going to turn it over to Julie.
Thank you very much, Meredith. As we're thinking about ramping up the number of trees that are available for forest regeneration in northern Minnesota, I think it's important to think about the fundamental problem, which is very well depicted by this picture that shows the boreal species that live up here are dying and not regenerating. And this is due, at least in part, to climate change. Climate drives vegetation in our state, but that climate is not likely to stay constant. And of course, in fact, it's already changing. And the consequence of that for us is that this patch, for example, of climate that's down in southeastern Minnesota will likely move up into our region into the future. And this is already happening, but you can think about the effect of this if you consider what the vegetation is like in those two areas. We have boreal forest up in St. Louis County, and down in Dodge County, it's much more prairie-like with mixed deciduous forest. So this really brings us to two central questions for this grant. If we're going to do all of this planting, what species should we be planting? And within those species, where should we be getting our populations? Should they be local, or should we be thinking about going a little bit further south? And even if we have the answers to those two questions, are those trees actually available? So this project targets each of these questions. It also relates to the IonE impact goals. One of the ways that we can approach carbon neutrality is by planting trees, which not only sequester carbon in themselves, but plant diversity also encourages carbon sequestration in the soil. And we need to think carefully about how we use our land as we're doing reforestation so that we have a sustainable land use plan for the future, and lots of people are thinking about this. Moreover, resilient ecosystems are also associated with higher quality drinking water, as shown by this study from Sweden. Okay, so which species should be planted? Well, we can use models to get some ideas. Boreal species are probably not a good idea, but temperate species might do well in the climates of the future. And then within those species ranges, where should we obtain the seeds? You can see here for these common species, bur oak, red oak, and white pine, in northeastern Minnesota, we're very close to the northern edge of the species range. So as these distributions move, as climate changes, perhaps trees will be mismatched to the climate to which they're adapted. And we've done some work that indicates that that's true for at least some species. So perhaps southern source material may thrive better today and into the climate of the future. But these are all unknowns. We do not know which species will do well. We do not know which populations will do well. How far south do we need to go in order to obtain plants that are pre-adapted to the conditions of the future? We plan to do research to address that question while at the same time ramping up production of seedlings in farms in northeastern Minnesota. In this grant, we plan to first in July find large populations of many species for seed collection, while David is developing a network of farmers and nursery growers who would like to participate in this project. In the fall, we'll go back out to the populations, collect seed, and over the winter, learn how to germinate them. And then those protocols will be transmitted to farmers through training. In the spring, we'll distribute the seed to the growers, and they'll start ramping up production. In the meantime, we will plant an experiment and start looking at how the different species and populations do in our garden and also on the farmers' plots. We've already gotten funding to do work like this. We just got funded for coordination and implementation work with the farmers, and we will submit a grant to LCCMR in March. And with that, I would just like to leave you with a list of our expertise and our roles. And with that, I'll thank you for your attention, and we're looking forward to answering any questions you might have.